and roughly a 50% reduction in overdose deaths. You think about that. How many lives are being saved just because of this operation? In addition to that, holding those accountable and making the arrest of those drug trafficking organizations. 12 out of 13 of our primary targets were arrested. 20 additional secondary targets were arrested. One key arrest that we made was Edward Verdi Bruno. He was in Palmetto Beach in a drug trafficking organization, and his associates were responsible for fentanyl and cocaine distribution. I'm going to give you just a rough idea of the amount that we seized. Approximately 15.4 kilograms or 34 pounds of drugs, of fentanyl, meth, and cocaine. To break it down, it was over 2,000 grams of cocaine, over 4,000 grams of fentanyl, and 0.82 grams of heroin, and 657 grams of marijuana, over nearly 4,000 grams of meth, and roughly 50 grams of oxycodone. It didn't stop there, though. We seized 28 firearms, 18 handguns, 7 rifles, and 3 shotguns. In addition, ammunition, currency, and packaging material were also seized. As part of this operation and all of our other efforts at the Tampa Police Department, including our crime reduction efforts, this led last year to us seeing a 13% reduction in our homicides. In addition to that, last year, our violent crime, as we posted in our annual report, was an 8.3% decrease citywide. Our violent crime with a firearm was a 17.2% decrease citywide. And again, our Narcan deployments, which means our officers having to use those life-saving measures for drug overdoses or drug poisoning, was a 24% citywide. Operation Overdrive is one of many examples that the Tampa Police Department partners with our partnering agencies. So this estimated result of this operation is that roughly 21,000 deadly doses of fentanyl and roughly 9,500 deadly doses of meth have been removed from the streets of Tampa. Operation Overdrive mitigated operations of East Tampa drug trafficking organizations due to the successful takedown of the Palmetto Beach drug trafficking organization. 15 have been sentenced federally as of now for a combined total of 125 years in federal prison. 125 years. Those people are being held accountable for their actions. 7 additional are pending sentences, and an additional 9 are facing state charges. To discuss a little bit more about that, I'd like to bring up our U.S. Attorney, Roger Handberg.
Thank you very much, Chief Burkhoff, for hosting us here today, and thank you, Special Agent in Charge Reuter, for your leadership on this and bringing us all together to talk about Operation Overdrive. I'm honored to be here today with my local, state, and federal law enforcement partners to recognize the important work that was done during Operation Overdrive to combat what I believe is the deadliest drug threat that our country has ever faced, and that is fentanyl. Every year, the Florida medical examiners publish a report regarding the number of deaths caused by drugs in Florida. In 2010, the Florida medical examiners reported that fentanyl caused 114 deaths. Since then, the number of fentanyl overdoses in the state of Florida has increased over 4,800%. Deaths caused by fentanyl in Florida in 2015 first top 500. They increased to over 1,000 in 2016, over 2,000 in 2018, over 3,000 in 2019, and over 5,000 in 2020. In 2022, which is the year we have the most recent statistics, fentanyl was responsible for killing 5,622 people in Florida. Florida is not alone in experiencing an increase in fentanyl overdose deaths. Between 2019 and 2021, fentanyl overdoses across the United States increased by approximately 94%. Fentanyl is now the leading cause of death of Americans aged 18 to 44, and it has been a large contributor to the opioid epidemic that has had such a terrible impact on so many communities across this country. As the United States Attorney for the Middle District of Florida, I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for 35 counties in Florida. Because of that terrible impact that fentanyl has had on many of the communities that my office serves, my office has increased our resources to prosecute more fentanyl cases in federal court. Over the past 2 fiscal years, we have doubled the number of defendants we are federally prosecuting in fentanyl cases. These cases have resulted in large seizures of fentanyl. There are over 13 million people in the district that my office serves. Over the past 2 fiscal years, working with the Drug Enforcement Administration and our other law enforcement partners, we have seized enough fentanyl in our federal cases and our related law enforcement operations to kill every single person in this district 5 times over. My office has also prioritized the prosecution of cocaine and methamphetamine cases. According to the Florida medical examiners, cocaine and methamphetamine ranked 2nd and 3rd in causing drug deaths in Florida. In 2022, 2,598 people in Florida died as a result of cocaine, followed closely by 2,193 whose deaths were caused by methamphetamine. Tampa, like so many other cities, has suffered the violence and loss of life associated with the dangerous drugs of fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine. Operation Overdrive has provided us a new tool in that ongoing battle. Through its data-driven, intelligence-led approach, the DEA and the Tampa Police Department work together to identify areas of drug-related violence in our community with the purpose of focusing our efforts on the drug trafficking organizations responsible for overdoses in those areas. Once those drug trafficking organizations were identified, my office worked side by side with our law enforcement partners to bring federal indictments against members of those organizations. An excellent example of Operation Overdrive success is the case that Chief Burkhaw mentioned, involving a drug trafficking organization that has been operating in the Palmetto Beach neighborhood in Tampa. The Palmetto Beach neighborhood was one that had seen an increase in overdoses, both fatal and non-fatal. The leader of the organization that operated in that neighborhood was Edward Verde Bruno. As part of his operation, Verde Bruno used a car wash that he operated at 906 South 22nd Street in Tampa as a place where members of his organization would distribute fentanyl and cocaine. But not any longer. The investigation in this case was comprehensive. Through a series of controlled purchases made using a confidential source and other investigative techniques, the DEA, Tampa Police Department, ATF, FDLE, and the Postal Inspection Service built a case that has resulted in the dismantlement of the entire organization. 8 members of the conspiracy were indicted. All of them have been convicted. The leader of the drug trafficking organization, Verde Bruno, was sentenced to nearly 22 years in federal prison. One of his lieutenants, Armando Arredondo, was sentenced to more than 15 years in federal prison, and another member of the organization, Efrain Rivera Matos, was sentenced to more than 12 years in federal prison. In addition to the federal prosecutions of the 8 members of the conspiracy, the investigative agencies on the case seized over 2 kilograms of fentanyl and more than 2 kilograms of cocaine. This is just one example of the cases that my office investigated and prosecuted with our law enforcement partners as part of Operation Overdrive. In total, 22 defendants were federally charged, and law enforcement seized more than 4 kilograms of fentanyl, 2 kilograms of cocaine, and 3 kilograms of methamphetamine. This great work by law enforcement has undoubtedly saved lives. Just by itself, the amount of fentanyl that was seized during Operation Overdrive is enough to kill every person in the city of Tampa 4 times over. By stopping those 4 kilograms of fentanyl, 2 kilograms of cocaine, and 3 kilograms of methamphetamine from being distributed in Tampa and elsewhere, the investigative agencies on this case protected everyone in this community from those dangerous drugs. Reducing violent crime and overdose deaths is a top priority for the United States Attorney's Office and for everyone who is standing here with me today. You've heard today about some of the dramatic reductions in overdoses and murders that occurred during the course of Operation Overdrive. I want to take this opportunity to express my thanks to my law enforcement partners for their commitment and tireless efforts in achieving those remarkable results. But there are two important things to remember about the results we have announced here today. First, none of the agencies here today will be satisfied until the rate of violent crime and overdose deaths in this community is reduced to zero. Second, all of the agencies here today appreciate the great work that is being done to fight these evils by so many others in our community, including government officials, community leaders, other community stakeholders, and every one of the other law enforcement agencies and prosecutors who serve the people of Hillsborough County. Any reduction in violent crime and overdose deaths that has occurred as a result is a result of everyone's combined efforts in this community. And it will only be by everyone continuing to work together will further reductions be possible. And with that, we'll open it up to any questions.
Just wanted to ask, we heard there were some immediate effects of the investigations and arrests taking place. How long do those effects last for, or is it a matter of just more people coming in and getting to start these businesses all over again?
I think that's a question appropriate for Chief Burkhoff, so I'll turn it over to him.
Again, like you said, there's always new ones coming up, but if there's not an example like this to show how serious that we take this, I think when the DEA came and asked us to be part of Operation Overdrive, they were expecting several officers to be assisted. I provided 2 full squads to assist. That's how serious that we're taking this. And if there's anybody out there that thinks that they're going to be involved in drug trafficking organizations or have firearms, it's not just the Tampa Police Department, it's the U.S. Attorney's Office, it's the DEA, it's ATF, it's the State Attorney's Office. You will not get away with it, you'll be held accountable. So other markets might start up, but they'll be quickly in our crosshairs.
You mentioned Edward Bruno a couple times, both did. Just want to ask, since you brought him up, can you explain how we operate and how his organization works and what his means of bringing drugs into the community?
We can, again, we talked about the car wash, but we can get you more specifics on that later. If the U.S. Attorney wants to speak to that, he can.
If you look in his plea agreement, you'll notice that some of the drugs that were intercepted during the course of that investigation were intercepted by the Postal Inspection Service, which is one of the reasons they're with us here today. And it really shows the team approach that we have. And so if someone's going to get drugs using the mail, we're going to have the Postal Inspection Service as a partner on that case. And then they would use that, and I'm going to use car wash, I'll probably put it a little bit in air quotes for you. But they use that location then to do hand-to-hand drug transactions with people who would come up to purchase those drugs. But one of the ways they would get those drugs is through that means.
And how do they find their customers? How do they become known in the neighborhood?
That I don't have information on in terms of the specifics, in terms of how they marketed themselves, but they were doing, from what we could tell, a brisk business. And as you heard from some of the statistics that the chief provided, that case and the dismantlement of that organization is part of what we have seen is leading to a decrease in that area in overdoses. Other questions?
I have a question about the locality, and I'm conflicted, forgive me, I'm better in English than math, but I understood you to say that this area was, this is sort of the center of the investigations, and I believe it was the special agent who said Hillsborough County had a dramatic increase. Can you explain that to me, because it seems in conflict with what we're being told about violent crime in Tampa specifically going down in the last few months or weeks. I just need some clarification. I'm a little,
Yeah, I'll turn it over to the special agent in charge to handle the methodology.
So when I talked about the increase in violent crime, that was how Tampa locations were chosen. right? So we took violent crime statistics and overdose death rates from 2020 to 2022 and chose Tampa. Then the chief talked about the dramatic decreases seen after Operation Overdrive. So because of the specificity of where we chose to do the operations and targeted areas, that's why you saw the decrease there. So when I talked about an increase in violent crime, that was prior to this collaborative effort.
Is this operation responsible for the decrease in violent crime in Tampa in the last 2 years?
We believe Operation Overdrive had a significant response to this, right? Operation Overdrive targeted certain areas for the decrease. Now, is it solely the reason? No, we have men and women in law enforcement throughout this region working day in and day out on other things besides Operation Overdrive. But we feel that the targeted areas that we looked at before Operation Overdrive started and after Operation Overdrive ended saw that in those targeted areas.
And is the fentanyl increase, the number I thought I heard was 4,000%. Is that relevant to the last 2 years, going back 4 years? What is that?
So 4,000%
Percent
increase in what, seizures?
fentanyl distribution, and I think
So we see fentanyl is flooding the streets of the United States, and there's a increase in overdose deaths that we see, and it's continuing to increase. More and more fentanyl is being seized, so we know more and more fentanyl is coming into the United States. However, law enforcement across the United States feels like we're at a turning point. And one of the things that we like to do, and having you here to help educate the public on the dangers of fentanyl. We can't do it alone. Law enforcement cannot do it alone. Any other questions? Thank you.